Hey, hi, what's up? I guess I'm squirreling again. In a way, sort of surprised to find myself in here doing this, and in a way, sort of not. I suppose it's the nature of these random squirrels.
Anyway, dear, my husband and I want to know if you are interested in
And as
helping us
usual,
survive.
I'm in here because in the quote-unquote real world, I find myself sitting around the house, bored out of my gourd. I don't know exactly what to do to scratch that itch. And as usual, when I'm bored,
Knew it at an audition today. I should have worn the enema dress. What you got? Whatever.
I always pick the worst places to do these. I should know better than to have the people around me. It adds flavor, I guess. Where the fuck was I? When I'm bored, I find myself sometimes feeling trapped by my body. You know, because ultimately, fundamentally, any issues I have with being unable to go visit places or do things that are far out or are genuinely new are almost always inevitably tied to the fact that I have to drag my body somewhere, and that requires paperwork and costs money. So I hop into some virtual creation, usually GTA, maybe Skyrim, something, random. And I wander around, and I hope maybe that this time I'll find something new and have an adventure I haven't already had before. And even if I don't find such a thing, at least I can wander around in this reality, and it doesn't make my back hurt any more than it usually does. And if I fuck up, it doesn't cost a lot of money or wind up with me, broken legs or something. And I'm already getting sort of sidetracked because this squirrel kind of comes out of the sort of random, vague, and nebulous thoughts that I tend to have when I'm bored and pondering an existence where I'm free of the thing that tends to cage me the most and cause me the most discomfort, which is my body.
Fuck! Look at that bum!
And I think about consciousness and
Hey, man!
our
Come on,
seeming
darling, get your
desire
tits
as a species to strive out of our bodies, or in some way to be able to manifest our bodies in a way that pleases us the most.
Hey, we still on for that mani-pedi?
Kind of got to a fork in the road there. So, our species, for a very, very long time, has been creating virtual worlds. We've been making cave paintings, telling tales, great adventures and hunts. Somewhere along the way, we picked up language and told ourselves stories,
Holy hell!
recounted experiences out of the ordinary to entertain and educate.
Hi!
We started writing books, making more and more detailed art, sculpture, plays, radio, television, onto video games and virtual reality.
It's so hard juggling all the modeling and acting.
We seem to be moving
Enjoy your
towards
tits.
Whatever.
an ability to create
How's it going?
alternate realms of existence.
My boyfriend wants me to move in with him until whatever, but I'm not ready for that.
And that might have a few effects upon us as a species, good and bad. And I wonder sometimes if it's intentional. I'm talking, grander scheme of things. Is there a point? Are we supposed to try and work our way beyond our simple mortal forms? Is this a larval state for us? Are we merely eggs?
Hey, looking forward to seeing you on set, buddy.
Will we escape the cocoon at some point?
Hey!
Will we move beyond the need for devices and machines and drugs? And I'm not saying drugs in a good or bad way, because endorphins from exercise is a drug. God knows people get off, get hooked on keyboard cleaning spray. So fuck only knows what you can get addicted to. Anyway, I don't want to get sidetracked into the addiction squirrel.
Can't wait to have that drink next weekend.
In a way, it sort of ties in, I guess, because some people take drugs and harder drugs and get unhealthily attached to them because it takes them to worlds that are somehow to them more like home than the one they find themselves in, or perhaps more free of pain, or more filled with joy. Who knows? I know I find myself escaping into these virtual worlds because they are more filled with amusement and surprise than generally I can find in my day-to-day world, that generally contain places I could never get to in the span of a weekend that I have off in between weeks of work, blah blah, whatever. So I find, it interesting to think, about where humanity might go if we learn to exist interconnectedly with more forms of reality. And not necessarily alternate realities right at first, but even the ability to, let's say, interface, like in The Matrix, or in, there's a Bruce Willis movie called Surrogates, where people interact virtually through artificial bodies. Sometimes to do dangerous work, sometimes just to, I don't know. There's a kind of interesting sort of scene in the movie where it's like a bar scene, and this beautiful woman meets this handsome man, and they hit it off, and they're like, later on, they're like making out in the alley, and I can't remember exactly what happens. I think they're like going in somebody's car, and they're doing the backseat whoopee, And something happens, I won't tell you what, because it'll kind of spoil it if you want to see that movie. But the funny thing is the woman is actually an artificial life form being controlled and interacted through by the sort of stereotypically overweight, sort of sweaty, unwashed, neck-bearded stereotype of the internet nerd kind of thing. Like comic book store guy in The Simpsons. But he was, experiencing life as a beautiful woman through this artificial body. I'm not so sure who the handsome guy was. I don't think it's revealed at that point in time in the movie because it's kind of part of the plot, so I won't spoil it. But it was sort of a neat kind of existential experience because it happens a lot in things like GTA, where you meet somebody and they look like a hot chick, but they're not, or they look like, crazy green mongoloid-faced creation that they made in the character creator, but they're not really like that in real life. And bloody hell, I got sidetracked because I don't even know where the fuck I was going with that. Yeah, evolving, we're evolving. This is loud, I'm gonna run past it. Okay. The evolution of human consciousness and our seemingly centuries or millennia long desire to create alternate realities to experience purely for the sake of pleasure, but I think of course it can be also used for the sake of learning and growth. Make a mind and a consciousness adaptable to various situations. Some cultures use physical trials, some cultures use ethnogenic trials, iboga ceremonies, ayahuasca, peyote, etc., etc. There are different ways of achieving these things. Some people free dive and go like 300 feet down with no equipment, holding their breath for like 2, 3, 4 minutes. They're teetering on the edge of something great, and it brings them some sort of attachment or reconnection to the deeper, multifaceted sort of collection of realities that I think are bordering on each other close enough that we can learn to perceive them if we take the time to do so. Like a bunch of neighboring radio stations all sharing, the FM band. Or like the electromagnetic spectrum that is visible light, but also radio waves and infrared and ultraviolet. It's all the same spectrum of the same energy, but we are blind to some of it because we are limited by the apparatus that we see it with through our physical bodies. If we could perhaps interact with in a matrix-like interaction, a total, full, conscious interaction with other useful bodies, perhaps. Bodies that could withstand the pressures of the deep ocean and had sensory equipment to perceive the world around them in that environment, where the spectrum of visible light is completely useless, but things like sonar and perhaps infrared, although I don't know because it's cold down there. But for example, laser scanning, who knows? And they would be able to perceive the world around them, and we could explore things like that, or space. I mentioned before, and one of our other squirrels, when I was kind of thinking about long-distance space travel, about storing consciousnesses is in virtual realities. So I won't get into that, but, it goes into that as well. But at some point, we would be able to spend so much time completely in these other methods of experiencing reality that, our bodies would have to be stored, I guess, if we kept wanting to come back to them. But at some point, I think we would probably stop seeing the need to come back to our biologically grown bodies. It wouldn't matter, as our consciousness would continue to exist one way or another. We might want to find, one we like that's a favorite. Perhaps it could be a created one. And we keep coming back to it, and we have a place to store it, like a home, if we want to experience that sort of thing. Or maybe our homes are virtual. Suddenly we don't need the land on the planet to grow our own food, and we don't need to cover miles of it in stone and steel to inhabit it. I don't even know where the hell to go with that. Just off into space, I guess, like figuratively.
Hello, this is him.
Because if we don't need space to exist in, we can create our own spaces. It boggles the fucking mind, it does, I tells ya. Bloody hell. Okay, that's one I gotta walk off. I gotta walk off that squirrel. So these are the random sort of vague things that trip my mind up when I've got nothing to do but wander around in here and think about bizarre shit. And I wonder if such a transition would be... Oh, God damn it. Jesus, lady. Christ almighty, look who's going.
I couldn't wish for anything else.
Oh, fuck. Random hit and run squirrel. I'm making this guy nervous. I don't think I've ever walked through here. I'm going to take a pause here and preempt the 15-minute thing. Give me a sec. Okay, so would such a transition be difficult for humanity to make, from dependence on our physical bodies to independence from our physical bodies?
Network TV is for losers.
The way our current society is set up, of course, it would be the rich and the financially well-off that would achieve such a thing first, of course. There might be some parts of the world that were centuries in catching up in that respect because of the imbalance of resources and power that currently exists in our social structure. So, as our society stands now, no, it wouldn't be a smooth transition. It would leave some of us very either slaves to the storage of the rich and famous' bodies, you know what I mean? Or slave to the machines that create all of this. And that would, in a way, split our species into two different species. The privileged and enlightened, and the enslaved and darkened, and that's not a good way to go. There's always the hope, of course, that existing in this wide variety of realities could open the minds of those who might try and hoard such a thing for themselves than for only those who could pay the money to make them richer if it was something that they had, the rights to, so to speak, in a legal manner, not in a moral manner. But in a way, if it's something like the internet is now, where it's a more open sharing of information, not all of it true, not all of it false, where things that people see can be instant. Oh, hey, oh, sorry, lady. Yeah, you're right. I'm a douche. Just walked right into you. The hell is this place?
Oh my god, how are you?
I might be going to Andorra next month. I've got to find a subletter, preferably an Asian
Fuck.
fashion student. I'm sort of depressed. because
Sidewalk
my
dancing squirrel.
traveling, that makes me too shallow.
Yes,
So yeah, I suppose that might be the dangerous sort of. That might be the dangers of artificially achieving independence from our physical form. A state one might be tempted to call enlightenment. As opposed to, let's say, perhaps the natural methods of doing so, where one reaches those abilities or reaches the ability to attain states where one can interact with alternate realities or alternate methods of perceiving this reality. Now, one might argue that taking something like peyote or magic mushrooms or whatever, it would be kind of using an artificial device to aid the process, but I think perhaps I beg to differ, because it comes from nature. And I have no idea if the way the universe works is an intentional thing or not. I have no idea if there's some sort of greater intelligence guiding everything. I have no idea. Simply put, if it's all just random or if there's some sort of pattern, and if there is a pattern, where does that pattern come from? I'm unsure of that, and I don't know if I'll ever know. Shit. I had a point. It's back there somewhere. Maybe if I go back, I'll get it again. Hold on, I'm going to try and find my point. Right. I found it. Okay, I dropped it right here. So my point is, although I don't know if there is a point to the universe working in the way it does, I know that the universe never breaks its own rules, and that it also contains all of its own information. Inasmuch as if, as to say that you can find out everything about the universe by simply observing the universe. And if one can observe the universe in a different way by eating a plant that exists within this universe and seems to perhaps lead some to contact other intelligent consciousnesses through the taking of this naturally occurring plant, fungus, sorry, whatever, then by the very nature of its existence, it cannot be unnatural because it exists naturally. But can a person not also say that if mankind is able to create the technology to aid a similar sort of transformation of perception and such a similar entrance of consciousness into a new state, and if that technology is created by something that arose of its own accord in nature, then is that not also something that by its very existence is natural? Well, screw me sideways like a duck in heat. I just don't know where to go from that. Maybe I'll stop there. Sometimes it's good to end on a really big question and leave people alone with their own thoughts so they can think about it on their own. Because I genuinely don't have any answers to that one, which is why it's something that always comes up in my mind and I puzzle over when I'm bored. And I never seem to get anywhere so that I can explain it any better than I think I just have, and give me a week, I might explain it different. Who knows? Anyway, have fun thinking. Whoa, hey, that was fucked. I went, hey. So yeah, Have fun thinking. Don't stop thinking. Be excellent to one another. Have a good one.